Oh, this is another Doctor Who review, and as we're in the lead up to Halloween, I thought I would review this one, the Daemons, or Demons if you prefer, which is an old, well, as you can see, there you go, Jon Pertwee and Roger Delgado as the Third Doctor and the Master. It was broadcast in 1971. And it has this wonderful feel of Quatermass and the Pit about it. For those of you who are familiar with the old, well, there's been several remakes, both the TV series and various film versions of Quatermass and the Pit. The character of Quatermass is said to have heavily inspired and influenced the idea of the Doctor as this eccentric scientist meandering around the universe, tackling bureaucracy and fighting against the complacency and indifference of a largely gormless system, which is pretty much what Quatermass does as sort of the mad scientist of his day. I'm surprised they've never brought that back for a modern series. Actually, maybe there's something in there that some TV producer somewhere could have a crack at doing. But there is a similarity between this one and the Pit, because in Quatermass and the Pit they dig down into the London Underground, and they find submerged in the where the train station is this weird device that eventually turns out to be an alien space vessel. Quite a small thing, but it's shrunk down. There's all sorts of weird nonsense going on there. That's pretty much the premise of this. In that, quick summation of the plot. It opens with an eccentric archaeologist giving a TV broadcast of an archaeological dig that's about to take place on the eve of Beltane, the 1st of May. Or Walpurgis and that thing, if you want to be a bit German about it. This dig is taking place at a tiny village in the back of a rural place called Devil's End, suitably enough. And as they're going into this barrow, all sorts of weird stuff. So wind whips up, and the cameras are falling over and collapsing, and everything is shaking. There's all these spectral voices, and cold blasts of icy air come wafting out of everywhere. The Doctor, Jon Pertwee, has seen this TV broadcast for the sort of the earlier version of it, the lead up to the big reveal at the ultimate point of the broadcast, and realises that something terrible is about to happen with his time-lord intuition, and off he races. Doesn't get there quite in time. And what they discover inside this burial mound is a shrunken down spaceship. So it's a huge spaceship that's been reduced with alien technology to a tiny size, that still weighs 10 tons, and it contains the essence, the presence of the alien species that piloted this spaceship to Earth 100,000 years ago, the Daemons. One particular one called Azel, which is obviously a play on Azael and various other names for the devil. The Daemons, as you'll note from the cover art there, look pretty much like the medieval depiction of Satan or the ancient Greek depiction of Pan. They are satyrs. And Azel is described as the last of the Daemons. Now, whether he is the last of his entire species in the whole cosmos, or simply the last one of a party that came to Earth, but there are still other Daemons back on the planet Deimos. That's never wholly clear, but he's at least the last one on Earth, if not the last of his entire species. They came to Earth as a scientific expedition, to experiment with early humanity and tinker with them and try and improve them and work upon them. That went well, didn't it? Meanwhile, we have this Dennis Wheatley plot going on, in that the local vicar has disappeared in the night. And obviously you kind of know he's going to turn up dead in a ditch somewhere, although they never actually find his body, but you know it's going to happen at some point. The new vicar, the Reverend Magister, arrives, and Magister is Latin for master, and it is the master, the evil Time Lord, who turns up disguised as the vicar. Magister, as well as being Latin for master, is also a title used in a number of witchcraft covens, and is referred to in a number of different witch trials, not all of them, but It's a name that crops up sometimes as the male leader of a coven, the Magister. So there's a multiple play on words going on here. And having arrived in this sleepy little village, the Reverend Magister quickly subverts the local community and ropes them all into satanic rituals in the cellar, the crypt of this church. And there they all are in these very fancy, elaborate robes. And the Master's robe has embroidered into this sort of sash part that comes round here in the Theban alphabet, which is an invented alphabet used mostly by witches and by Wiccans to write secret messages, but the word Master is embroidered into his costume. So somebody obviously in the wardrobe department did a bit of investigating and found the Theban alphabet and went round with needle and thread and stitched that costume up quite nicely. So there is a sort of illusion that again it's the magical subtext of the time, and there's this whole genre of British folk horror that the Daemons keys into. Lots of films and TV shows and novels and one thing and another based around the idea of strange magical practices going on in the countryside and people getting up to all sorts of weird things. And you could say either this is a reflection of kind of an awareness that paganism was present in the countryside, or maybe as much it reflects a kind of a towny prejudice that the countryside is not this bucolic rural ideal. Instead it is a rather a kind of a pagan, in a sinister way, undertones and sacrifice and pouring blood into the fields and all sorts of strange goings on. Very kind of town-based Christian anxieties as to what pagans get up to in the countryside. Perhaps not terribly reflective of what they actually were getting up to, but nonetheless. So it's playing into all those old horror movie tropes, and it does it quite nicely. Even to the point of having a living gargoyle, Bok, who is, whether he's a real creature or he's animated stone, that's, well, not entirely clear, but he's basically what looks like a stone gargoyle who suddenly springs to life and runs around, conjuring up somewhat unconvincing special effects to zap people with. Presumably at the command of the Daemons, although he does seem to answer to commands from the Master as well. So the purpose of this coven that the Master has whipped up is to conjure forth the presence of Azel. And because Azel is a hugely powerful alien with all sorts of amazing abilities that your average alien simply doesn't have, and clearly that Time Lords don't have, well, at least the Master doesn't have. The Master is wanting to get in the good books of Azel and be appointed as ruler of Earth, and be given all of the amazing powers that the Daemon has to dispose of. And there is a sense almost that Azel appears to be looking to pass his powers on to someone else in order that he can either fly back to Deimos or perhaps just lie down and die. There's an interesting scene where the Doctor and the Master are seen to be kind of competing, that just to convince Azel. The Master trying to convince Azel that no, the Doctor's the baddie and the power should come to him, and the Master, the Doctor saying, oh no, the Master's the baddie, but I don't want the power, just keep the power to yourself. The ending is a little bit, I have to say, a little bit unconvincing, because Joe Grant, the Doctor's companion, leaps in to try and save the Doctor from being killed by Azel, and Azel goes, oh, I can't compute that you're prepared to sacrifice your life for this man, and on the basis of not very much, he sort of shrivels into himself, and the whole thing comes to an end, and the church crypt and obviously the church on top of the crypt all blow up as a result of that, and probably kill a lot of the cultists, although the Master gets away, as the Master almost always does. Lots of entertaining kind of nonsense going on there. Do wish the ending had been a little bit stronger in terms of how they defeated Azel, or perhaps they had simply, Doctor had succeeded in convincing Azel just to go back home to Deimos, something like that. But nevertheless, other characters worth noting are Miss Hawthorne, the White Witch of the village, which she played by Damaris Hayman. who's still going strong. I think she's about 90 odd now. Highly entertaining actress who did loads and loads and loads of things back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, playing sort of very posh, slightly batty old dears, which is pretty much what she plays in this episode of Doctor Who, a very posh, batty old dear who is a white witch and recognises the dangers and the risks being posed by these forces that have been sleeping underneath the village of Devil's End for umpty thousand years, and having a kind of a permeating influence on the village around them and the people around them. In a lot of ways, it lays the bedrock for a Tom Baker episode, The Image of the Fendal, which again deals with this idea of an ancient alien force buried under a village and influencing the sort of magical presences and magical powers of people within the village, and that also features a white witch, although nowhere near as posh a white witch as Miss Hawthorne. The very final scene of the whole episode, once all of the baddies have been sorted out and the master has been dispensed with, is that the village goes back to having its maypole ritual. There had been a moment where they tied the Doctor to the maypole when everyone was under the influence of the master and were about to set light to him in a very unhistorical witch burning. I say unhistorical because witch burnings didn't take place in this country. There was something found on the continent and up in Scotland. In England, we hanged witches rather than burnt them. But nonetheless, they go about getting ready to burn the Doctor, who then declares that he is the ancient wizard Qui Qui Quod, or at least Miss Hawthorne declares he is the ancient wizard Qui Qui Quod, and they go through this sham bit of him casting spells with the aid of a sniper who causes lamps and things like that to explode, and Bessie, his vintage roadster, which he now has on autopilot control, and it looks as if he's magically making the car move around. And it all gets a little bit Scooby-Doo when it's through go, ha, you thought it was magic, but actually it's science. But yeah, never mind. Qui Qui Quod, amusingly, is Latin for hoo. So that kind of fits in nicely with the whole atmosphere there. We've yet to see the demons ever reappear, although there's been references to them. Demons Run, for example, appears in the new series as an asteroid which perhaps is named after the demons of Daemons. So maybe one day they will resurface at some point in the future. Even if they were all wiped out, it's a time travel series, so they can go back to a point before they were wiped out, and you can discover more about them, which would be highly engaging. But I thought that was a suitable one to go for, as I say, with Halloween looming. I do enjoy Jon Pertwee's stuff. He's a remarkably entertaining Doctor, a bit of an action-man Doctor with his gadgets and his James Bondy bits and pieces. Very engaging. And if you've not seen it, keep an eye open for it. It's highly entertaining and worth a watch, worth acquiring. There we go. Thank you.